Welcome and thanks for joining us on episode number 277 of the Financially Independent Teachers Podcast. If you think your story could help other educators and you'd be willing to come on the show, please check out our webpage at financiallyindependentteachers.com and fill out the form to come on the show. Man, it is so good to have a fellow Buckeye on the show today. We've got Eric from Northwest Ohio. Funny thing, we talked before the show and we actually know a mutual kind of a person from the region that he lives in, and I was in this person's wedding back in the day and lived with him in college. So Eric, small world when you have Buckeyes together.
OH.
I joke all the time. I say Ohio is a great place to be from, but I really don't want to live there anymore.
I'll tell you
Um,
what, the longer I live here, the more I'm starting to get settled in. The only thing those winters sometimes can get a little harsh, but
yeah,
you know what? You were just talking about you're going to get ready to cut eight yards of grass in 100-degree heat. It's 75 here, and I'm going to go tee it up and play some golf. So, like, it to each his own, right? It's just chase the sun and chase the seasons, baby.
that's right. I love Ohio. I'm so proud to be from Ohio. My whole family still lives up there. I'm from Northeast Ohio. But when I graduated from Mount Union back in 2005, you know how things were in Ohio back in the day. You used to have to teach 30 years to get a
Yep.
full retirement
Yep.
in Ohio. And then when I was in college, the state switched it up and said, now to get a full retirement, you've got to teach 35 years. So I happen to be in that gap of college graduates where teachers who should have been retiring ended up having to stay an extra 5 years. And I remember social studies jobs. I student taught at Canton McKinley High School. McKinley, Masson, what a rivalry. What a great place to.
Yeah.
I got
Good
to eat
football.
lunch every day overlooking the Hall of Fame Stadium where they play the Pro Football Hall of Fame game every year for the Canton McKinley Bulldogs. But they had 150 applicants for just one social studies job. And to get the job, you'd have to interview in front of the department chair. And then if you made the next round, you'd have to interview in front of the department chair, the assistant principal, and then the principal. And then if you made the next round, then you'd have to interview in front of the school board. And I'm like, man, this is a lot of work. There's 150 people out there. And it depended on, did you coach football? Did you coach this or whatever? Did you know this person? So I said, you know what? I'm going to go down south where the population is booming. I'm going to go to North Carolina. I'll get some experience and then I'll come back to Ohio. And then, sure enough, in my second year, I met my wife, my now wife, and she was my real estate agent. And now we've been together for 18 years. So I never did come back to Ohio full time, but I have a soft spot in my heart for it.
All
Where are
right.
you in Ohio?
So I'm located in Northwest Ohio. I teach at a small public school called Van Buren, kind of halfway down between Findlay, Ohio, and Bowling Green. So I think our high school size, I teach high school, we have about 300 high school students. So again, very small, very public school, but it's also my alma mater. I graduated from there in 1994. I just completed my 25th year teaching there. I have another 2 years prior to that at a school down the road, Fall Story High School. So be starting year 28 here in early September. So
So, what does retirement look like now? I know that there's been some shifting in Ohio again from the 30 to the 35. What's it look like now to get that full pension?
yeah, that's a great question because you started talking about that a little bit. And so I started teaching in the year 2000. So I came in the expectations of 30 years. Well, of course, 5 years in, you're not going to be grandfathered, right? So I go from what my vision was teach till I was, you know, early 50s and be able to kind of look at maybe an encore career or potentially retirement if you do things the right way. And then I even felt like a little bit of the rug was slipped out from underneath me. 5 years in, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up
You
for.
change the rules.
You changed the rules on me. So, but I was enjoying my early parts of my career. I felt really at home teaching back at my alma mater. I was starting to establish a family, and my career was off to a good start, and it was going down a good path. So we just, we hung in there. And now recently, the state of Ohio is starting to make some changes. And I can't tell you exactly where it's at, but I think it's now 32 years is what I think it is. It has moved a lot in just the last 3 years or so with some caveats to it. How many years do you already have in? How many years do you have left? So I believe it's currently at 32 for me. I'm looking at the last 5 years or so. But I don't know if that means I'm going to be done teaching. I'm having a blast in the classroom.
That's what I was
So
going to ask you. Do you see yourself going beyond 32? And what does that look like for you in retirement? Like, what are you, I know you're a golfer. Are your retirement dreams to, travel the country and golf at all the best courses? Is it to just sit around and go hang out at, Put in Bay? What are you going to do in retirement?
I love it. These are questions that my wife and I have all the time. I'm a busybody. Um, right now, I teach with some of my best friends, and so like when you get to go to work with your best friends every single day, it sure makes it easy to show up to work. I have an amazing administration. My principal is phenomenal, super supportive. So it's easy to go to work every day. And so in 5 years, what will that look like? I don't know. If it looked like it does right now, I don't know if I would be done teaching. I get so excited to get in the classroom. The years are just flying by. They're just peeling off left and right. I feel like recently in the last 5 or 6 years, I started teaching personal finance, and I think that really rejuvenized my passion for teaching. It was a topic that students um, either had a little bit of a handle on, or thought they had a handle on, or know they need to have a handle on, but nobody didn't. You didn't need a foundation. I think that's the best thing to explain. With algebra, you need to have a basic foundation of knowledge before you can start pumping out equations, right? But with personal finance, you could come into my classroom and we could start from square one, and we can build from the ground up. And we are creating the base layer for these future employees out in the real world to understand how to handle their money. And that really got me super excited. So um, outside of that, though, to bounce back to it, part of me feels like there's a skill set in me that hasn't been tapped, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's sales. I love data. I love Microsoft Excel. I would consider myself quite efficient in it. I could see myself in a role as like an analyst of sorts. I don't know. I don't know. So we're going to keep teaching for the next 5 years, and we're going to see where things are at. So
So you're not one of these fire people. Obviously, you're probably all about the financial independence, but the whole retire early piece that, when I'm 52, I'm out of here and I'm going to go just chill. That's not you.
no, no, I don't think so. I think I watch my own father. He's 78 years old, a former educator himself, and he is just go, 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 and he's in great health. Him and my mother both, and I see the correlation between his continuing to work in the construction field after being a math teacher for 30 years, 35 years, and I see his excitement for still being able to help people. And so I don't know what that fire looks like for a lot of other people. When they say retirement, I don't know, man, do people really just sit around and just watch TV for the rest of their lives? I don't think I can do that. But I definitely want to make sure that my wife and I talk often about creating some financial independence, and that's a huge goal of ours that we have made a high priority here over the last decade.
And yeah, the crazy thing is you probably potentially could retire because you and your wife just recently reached a pretty cool milestone, if you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, and I hope we get a chance to kind of talk a little bit about how we got there. But
Yeah, we're gonna get there.
yeah, yeah. But just recently, my wife and I would say it would be fair to say that our net assets and net worth have reached $1 million. So that was kind of a goal of ours to kind of get over to that hump. But it, I'm sure a lot of people will say this. It was great. We celebrated, we hugged, we cried a little bit because there's some stories behind getting there. But the pedal has to stay down, right? The focus has to stay maintained. And so it was literally a 1 day celebration for 10 years worth of work.
So you didn't go out and have a $500 dinner or anything like that?
No, no, sir. No, we did not. We've celebrated some other times in those kind of ways here and there, but that one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was just a dinner at home with the kids around who have been part of this journey as well. I have three older children from a prior marriage, and then my wife and I have a young 3.5-year-old son together, and so we celebrated with them.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Now, I do want to get into that story because that's the meat of today's
Yeah,
episode, but I was just kind of curious. You hit the net worth millionaire status. You've been teaching now 25 plus years, most of it in the same school, the same
yeah.
hallways that you walked
Same
through as a student.
classroom.
Same classroom.
Yeah,
I was curious, just for people listening all over the country, I think it's a lot of fun to kind of see what pensions look like in different states and salaries Are you familiar with your district or neighboring districts? For somebody who's just starting out, let's say right out of college, what a year one teacher would make versus, what you can max out on the salary scale. Because I know in Ohio,
Oh,
there are some that make over 100 grand a year. Then there's other districts that you'll never make it past 65,000. It's so district and local when it comes to that.
yeah. Okay. So I think I'm going to be ballpark, if that's fair. I know
Yeah,
where
that's
I'm at.
fair.
I know where I'm at, but I don't know what our starting salary is. And well, that's probably a little bit embarrassing to say that, but it's been a long time since I've been there too. um, yeah. So I think our salary starting out, base salary, bachelor's degree, no experience. I'm going to say we're probably starting somewhere around $40,000 in my district. I think that's probably pretty comparable in my small community around Northwest Ohio. A lot of small public schools, a sprinkle of larger schools in the metropolitan areas like Findlay and up near Toledo and even Bowling Green. And then for me, we have a moving scale that moves across the top with your education levels, and then down based on your years of experience. So this year, I will hit 27 plus, which is the end of our scale for the years, and I'm all the way on the right side as well. This is a big thank you to my wife. She continued to push me and push me and push me, and was part of our conversation. How do we get ready for retirement? What does it look like? Well, we need to try to max that scale out, right? This is for the rest of our lives, this amount of money that we're going to be collecting on a pension. And so it was a master's plus 30 for us on our scale. That's going to take me to right about $97,000 in year 27 plus. And then I also have a supplemental where I coach high school golf. And that's going to put me just over $100,000 as a teacher and coach here in our district.
Gotcha. That's great. And cost of living there in Northwest Ohio isn't bad at all.
No, no, it's very affordable. There's a lot of great small neighborhoods. There's a lot of really nice homes that can be found affordable. Um, yeah, it's a very very nice place to live.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area up there. So one last thing, and then I really want to get into the story. When it comes to your pension, have you started locking in on what those numbers are going to look like? Now, obviously, again, we know that, salary schedules can change, they can increase. You might end up staying, 40 years, as much fun as you're having right now. You seem to be really passionate about it. But what are you anticipating when it comes to your pension annually? If you were to go the 32 years ish.
Yeah, I think so. The way it would work here in Ohio, you have a couple different options. I've just started to educate myself on this. To be honest, I've just started to attend some what we call STRS, State Teacher Retirement Systems meetings, and start to educate like what's that going to look like. My wife is about 10 years younger than myself, so she's currently working in corporate America, and um, because of that age gap, one of the things you just have to be real with too is like the spousal survivor benefit. So we'll have an opportunity to take a little lower percentage, probably closer to 70% of my best 5 years. And then that's going to give her the survivor benefits, which should entail like if I were to pass, I mean, we just can use common numbers, right? I'm 10 years older than her. That she would then receive that benefit as well moving forward until she would pass. So that's something that Courtney and I are continuing to talk about. Um, and then we talked a little bit about like, well, what's next? So does it mean I have to be done teaching? Can I go look into something different? And as we were mentioning earlier, if 5 years from now, 6 years from now, I reach that goal where I could potentially retire, and I feel like I do now about going into the classroom and teaching with my friends and my administration where it's at, I don't see an end in sight. And some of that even has to do with like I mentioned, I have a 3.5-year-old son. I mean, he's going to be in fourth or fifth grade when I'm looking to retire. Either I'm at home baking brownies for the PTO, or I'm out there working doing something, right? So yeah, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but that's kind of the way the pension would be set up.
So it's safe to say you're looking at gross probably somewhere around 70,000 a year for the pension.
Yeah, correct. And then Ohio has what they call a COLA, or a cost of living adjustment. I've talked to my father, again, a previous educator, about that, and he goes, it's nothing to get too excited about. It's not going to move the needle a whole bunch. So I think that number that we're talking about is going to probably look pretty static for the most part moving forward
Yeah.
for the next 30 years of my life, or maybe the next 40 years of my wife's.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with North Carolina, I'd say the average pension moving forward as pay scales hopefully increase, would be somewhere between 35 to $42,000 a year for a pension. But we also do get Social Security as well. So when you factor in Social Security and your pension, I'd say for a lot of North Carolina teachers, you're probably looking at between 60 and $70,000 a year, very
Yeah,
similar to Ohio. And if I'm not mistaken, Ohio teachers do not pay into Social Security as an educator, so therefore they won't get it unless they had some other job
correct.
outside of that. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I
All
think
right.
there are some things going on with Social Security. I'm not 100% educated on it. So, in the last year or two, my wife and I had visited our financial advisor, and he was talking about there looks like there might be some potential opportunities to receive some Social Security benefits.
Sure.
Again, I'm not educated enough
Yeah.
to talk about that exactly and what that number would look like. I would have no clue. I know we're going to talk a little bit about, we have some other things in the fire that we have brewing. So it's not just the pension that we're relying on when it comes to the retirement.
That's the windfall elimination provision. That was a big deal. So Ohio teachers still don't pay into Social Security, but lots of people had other jobs where they did pay into Social Security before they became a teacher or after. Now you'll actually be able to get more of your Social Security than you would have been able to. So that's definitely a win for Ohio teachers and I think 13 other states. So let's get into this crazy story. Here's Eric. You talked about you were married before. You've got
Mhm.
some adult children. Now you've got the 3.5-year old, and you and your wife just became net worth millionaires. Can you talk about some of the ups and the downs to get to where you're at now and provide hope for maybe other people out there that are in their 30s and 40s and they don't think they could ever get to where you're at right now?
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad to share this. I think it's important that you hear some of these stories, and I don't think mine's any different or any more special. It's just another story and another opportunity to give some, like you mentioned, some hope to people out there, because I did feel like I was at the bottom of the barrel. I got married the first time in 2000. Um, Within a couple years, we had our first child. She was an educator. I was an educator. We both had good jobs, right? And I remember often like going, man, why we got these good jobs? Why are we living paycheck to paycheck? Why is it so hard? Um, that's twofold. Habits, but we'll call them bad habits. You don't see them in the moment. You're like, oh, woe is me. And then now that I'm a little bit wiser and older, and I see, probably did some things that probably weren't the smartest, right? Um, and then obviously you just have to grow into your career a little bit, and you have to earn some more money, and you just have that opportunity for earning potential. But that relationship probably looked a lot like many relationships, and that is. I would handle the yard work and the heavy duty lifting stuff, and and she handled all the bills and all the finances, right? And so my head, and this is on me, my head was buried in the sand. I just, hey, whatever, okay, sounds good. Oh, we can't afford it, then let's not do it. Oh, we can go on a vacation this summer, let's go to the Outer Banks, right? I just wasn't involved, and you know 15 years go by, and we end up getting a divorce, and um, now we have three children, and at that time I think they were like 14, 12, and 9, and I hit the panic button. Like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to pay the gas bill. I mean, this is so embarrassing to even say some of this, but I had to start over. And when I grew up one of 6 children, and I don't know. I find this to be the case when I'm talking to my kids or my students in my classroom. Talking about money when I was growing up, it wasn't that we didn't talk about it. It just felt a little taboo. It felt a little like uncomfortable. And maybe some of it was because I was one of six and my dad was an educator and my mom was working weekends as a nurse. We weren't stashing money away, I'll tell you that. I don't remember not having what I needed. And I always remember wonderful meals at the dinner table and laughs. And it was an awesome upbringing, but there wasn't a lot of talk about money. And again, that's not to place blame on my parents, but I think it was just the culture, right? And I think we're seeing a shift, and man, that has me pumped. I mean, I see kids that are a little more skilled, a little more knowledgeable. My wife and I are talking to our kids, and you just have to set boundaries about what can be talked about and what can't. But it's real, and it happens every single day. Monetary transactions. So I end up divorced and it's like 2016 and I moved back into my small town and I'm leaning on my mom and dad for some help. I tried to stay away from the financial help. I wanted to get on my feet and I had some people reach out and offer some opportunities monetarily to help me. And I'm actually kind of proud I was able to avoid most of those. In the process, I made a couple mistakes. I did take out a loan on a 401k. Um, but then my story really starts to shift, and it shifts with meeting my wife. So after about 2 years of living on my own, I get a phone call from an old friend. She says, "Hey, you want to grab a cup of coffee?" Yeah, sure. Let's meet up. So we meet in our local small coffee shop, and we're both kind of playing the woe is me card, right? She had had some health scares and some health issues, and I was going through this divorce and kind of leaning on each other. And there were some tears and whatnot. And the conversations just continued to, and she was actually telling me about how she was, working through some debt related stuff as well. And these conversations and these text messages continued to just happen naturally. I wasn't really looking for a relationship. And then one day, she had come back. She lived in Orlando. She worked for the Disney company, and she had come back into Ohio again to visit. And we again grabbed a cup of coffee, and it was like November. And she said, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't you pack your golf clubs up, pack some shorts and some t-shirts, and come to Orlando in January and get out of the cold Ohio, and let's go play some golf." Shoot, okay, sounds good to me. It took one day of being there with her, and I knew that there was something there. That there was a relationship that had been kindling for quite some time, and so I took what felt like a very bold step and asked her, "Hey, would you be interested in dating?" And I got a quick yes, which was phenomenal. And we then had a very real conversation. We were both adults, and I said, "Listen, I got three kids back in Ohio. I can't move to Florida. I have a career." And she goes, it's time for me to come back home too. So home is back in our neck of the woods. It's in our neighborhood, in our small village. And so she started looking for some jobs. In the moment when we had that first conversation, I said, "Listen, it's going to be hard long term, but there's something that's really important to me. And that is, like, it's hard to tell you this, but I need you to love my children." And she looked at me and she just smiled. She goes, "That's going to be the easy part. I've got the hard one for you." And she goes, "I need you to study and understand Dave Ramsey's philosophies." And I said, "Yeah, sure. Of course, right? I'll do that. That seems easy enough." Uh, a little harder than I thought. So when we got married, Courtney and I were about $50,000 combined in debt. Courtney, on her own, bravo to her, had chipped out probably about 100,000 of her own. She had been doing this for about 10 years, maybe, been working on student loans, some medical debt, 401k loans. Being single and living in Orlando, Florida in your early 30s and working for Disney isn't as appealing as it might sound. It was hard. It was very hard to live on your own. And so um, together we set out to create a plan. She went with me to a financial peace class. It was offered at a church. I think it was 8 weeks. I educated myself a little bit on what this was going to look like and what is Dave Ramsey. And I would say too that we really were all in on that philosophy. Um, and we aligned ourselves with a lot of what his principles were. As we grew and we educated ourselves and we got ourselves out of the hole that we had created, we have shifted our thoughts a little bit. We might talk about that down the road. But in a matter of 8 months after we got married in November um, of 2019, 8 months later, we had paid off our $50,000 of debt. And we started a brand new relationship, and we were ready to go tackle what life was about to bring us. We just didn't know the curveballs that it was going to throw us. I think that's important too, is just to know that life's going to throw you some curveballs, and the best preparation for that is an emergency fund. So to continue down that storyline, we hammered that debt out. We always joked that we sold everything we owned except for the kids, and they weren't far behind. And so when we started thinking about what our future looked like, we decided that we wanted to have a child together. Now, at this point in time, I'm 45, 44, 45, and my wife is in her, she's probably 37, 38, somewhere in this ballpark. And um, getting pregnant was not easy. It was actually quite difficult, um, which brings on an expensive end of it. And we ventured down the IVF trail. Um, that wasn't going all so well. So we looked at the adoption option as well. Between IVF and adoption, we spent out of pocket about $120,000. Um, talk about and COVID's in there, right? Everybody has their COVID stories, right? So talk about a rough start to a marriage. Um, we were living in a 1,200 square foot house with pretty much at this time 3 grown children and 2 adults and one bossy Shih Tzu. And
I do want to stop you right now for a second, Eric,
yeah,
because I think one of the keys, we'll let you get a breather and get a drink there. One of the keys to this whole thing is you guys were being adults. I think when you're kids and you're getting married, and I'm not trying to like rehash old things, but it sounds like you and your first wife got married very young, you
yeah, I was
know,
like
really,
25.
yeah, early to mid 20s. Most of us are not taught anything about personal finance. So you're blending these two worlds together. A lot of times, both people have families that have never talked about money, but they do money differently. And then you're just trying to throw stuff together. I like the fact that you guys were both adults and you were like, hey, I can't leave my kids. You know, if you want this relationship to work straight up, you're going to have to come back to Ohio if we want this to really be something serious. And she said straight up, line in the sand. If we're going to do this, I also need you to get on board with this Dave Ramsey stuff. Hey, let's go do this financial peace course together. I think that is so critical. And I think a lot of times when people are just starting out, they're just happy to be in a relationship and they don't draw that line in the sand. And then we just kind of hope things work out. So imagine if you guys didn't get on the Dave Ramsey plan. She'd already worked to pay off 100 grand in debt. You guys are 50 grand in debt together in this new marriage starting over. She's trying to find a job. How critical was it to have the debt paid off and the baby steps in the emergency fund as you're going through this process of trying to have a child?
We could have done nothing more right than that. The conversations were often hard. Um, and, you're going through the emotional toil of not having successful pregnancies, but we knew we had our ducks in a row, and I felt very confident about that. There wasn't a lot of money. I mean, it was coming in and going right out, right? And all along, I hope this ends up being a beautiful thing. But all along, the other 3 children are witnessing it. They're seeing it firsthand. We're being very open and very honest with them and very real because Dave, man, you said it. Like, I am so passionate about getting my high school kids out of school and into life. And I always tell them, if you don't remember what I told you, remember how to find me so I can help you
Yes.
again. Right. Because again, it's a unique world. I know a lot of states are now requiring this curriculum. bravo, come on, the rest of the United States. If you're out there hanging on, going, what are you doing? Like, we need to help these kids. Let's get this done. But sometimes I often feel like even 17 or 18, they're not quite there yet. Man, they're close. They're really close, right? But they're not playing with their real money all the time. They're still dabbling in mom and dad's money. They're dabbling in their work money. They're getting graduation money, but they really don't have the, oh no, I just blew my tire out and now, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There are kids that are out there doing this, and man, I hold them to a whole nother level. Like, those are rock star kids. Our job as parents are to help our kids through those times as well, right? And but we need to make sure we also teach and we educate. And you're right, 23, 24. My daughter's getting married this December, and she watched us navigate this. And her fiance also, their family was very into the Dave Ramsey beliefs, and I think they're going to do really, really well. But the key component, which you said, is just conversation and talking. Nothing has been better for our marriage than our weekly budgeting meetings. We sit down at the table, coffee in hand, Saturday morning. Sometimes there's a toddler, sometimes there's adults sitting at the table, sometimes there's scrambled eggs being thrown across the table. But we talk about everything. See, what money does is it forces you to talk about everything. Hey, look at our calendar. You got a haircut this week. Great. How much do we need to set aside for the haircut? Now, you know what else has happened, Dave? I know my wife has a haircut. So when she walks in on Thursday after getting her haircut, it's an opportunity for me to be like, oh, you look wonderful. I like it. That looks really good. Right? Or she gets her
So
nails
we
done.
know as guys, if we didn't know the haircut happened, we might not notice. But if we
Yep.
were told the haircut was happening, we can say you look beautiful. We know they look
Exactly.
beautiful no matter what, but sometimes we're not the best at figuring out that you got the haircut.
Yeah, I mean, all these things show up in conversation. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm playing golf this week, so hey, how did your round go with your buddies today? What was the best shot you hit? And it just creates this conversation that creates this foundational layer for marriage and relationships that is so strong. And the IVF was difficult, and then we did get pregnant, and we did have a son, and he was born with cancer. And so it's like another blow, right? And like, oh my gosh, when are we going to catch our breath? But again, because we had this foundational understanding of each other, and because we knew where we were going, and because we did, I hate to say it, but the emergency fund is critical. It truly is. We were in a spot where we were like, oh my gosh, we're going to be in the hospital for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Where are we going to come up with this money to get hotels? And we looked at each other and we're like, we've got it if we need to do this now.
That's a
I will,
critical thing you just said. That's so critical because I would venture to say that most teachers and most people in any profession have no clue how their health insurance works until a crisis strikes. I know when my wife had breast cancer, I knew that I was on the 70/30 plan, but I was under the impression that 70% of the bills were going to be paid by the state, leaving me with 30% of no matter what the bills were. So when we had $1 million worth of chemo bills and everything else, I thought in my mind I was on the hook for 300 grand. And then I learned about this thing called an out-of-pocket max. It was $6,000. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. I had no idea about this
well,
out-of-pocket max. You learn really quick, but your insurance isn't going to cover the hotel stay. Your
no,
health insurance isn't going to cover the gas. It's not going to cover the food. So you still have to have an emergency fund if you're somebody out there thinking, we've got 6 grand in our emergency fund. That's good. That covers our out-of-pocket max. But what if
yeah.
you have to drive back and forth? What if you've got to be in a hotel or a long-term rental for 6 to 12 months in a new location for a hospital stay? Those are things that are often unaccounted for when we think of our
Yeah,
insurance.
no, and nobody wants to think about those things, right? And so part of our education in personal finance isn't just the money. You're so right, Dave. It's about teaching how insurance works. And again, we talk about this. Boy, teaching a 17-year-old how to handle out-of-pocket expenses and maxes and you know the different plans and PPOs, like insurance in its own world is a whole nother language. Teaching it to a 17-year-old who doesn't have to deal with it on a daily basis, that's a uphill battle, but at least we're again going back to it. If you don't remember, you can call. And I'm fortunate. My wife works in HR. She's so good at this stuff. She's great at dealing with brokers and understanding the language. And we were fortunate. Some of those things aligned with us very fortunately. I do need to give a quick shout out to Ronald McDonald House. Holy cow! When we were down and out and we were wondering where we were going to stay, it took 24 hours to realize we were literally a walk across the street from our son, and we were able to stay there for
Wow.
as long as we needed. We had a local cancer patient services that provided our fuel for us. So there are opportunities out there, and sometimes it's hard to go ask for help, right? I think that's important too. Yes, we had the money to do that if we needed it, but we also had help out there, and we opened our arms to that help. And now the great thing is our son is doing so well. He's thriving. He's awesome, and we now get to go help those people that helped us. And
And I want to
so,
give you an opportunity here. I thought this was unique because we do have people from all over the country. You and I are Buckeyes and Buckeye fans, and you are in Northwest Ohio, which is kind of an interesting place as you get near Toledo. I think there's even a store in Toledo that has half the store is
yeah,
Michigan gear and the other half of the store is Ohio State gear. You're a Buckeye fan. I'm a Buckeye fan, but you have a different view on the University of Michigan and those ugly Wolverines after this, if you
yeah.
want to share that.
Yeah, actually, I think our exit off of the interstate is the exact halfway point between Ohio Stadium and Michigan Stadium. So yeah, we see a little bit of a blend here in Northwest Ohio. Yeah, I grew up a Buckeye. Yeah, I root for the Buckeyes, but my son got his care through the University of Michigan. And it didn't take very long for me to let people know that I'm a Wolverine too. And athletics are one thing, but academics are another. And Michigan, the University of Michigan, their teaching hospital, Mott's Children's Hospital, the people there, they saved my son's life. So I have no shame in saying I will wear the blue and maize any day of the week, and be very, very, very proud of that. Come Saturday, you might see me cheering for the Buckeyes, but on the football field. But outside of that, I also I have a real soft spot for the University of Michigan.
That's awesome. I'll get in a go blue here for our Michigan fans that are out there. I know we've got a couple that listen for sure. So thank God that your son is healthy. Thank God for the University of Michigan and the Ronald McDonald House and the help in the community. Although you had money in emergency savings to cover some of this other stuff, it helps. Like I know when my wife had cancer, people did a meal train. You didn't have time to make food. People were delivering meals for like 60 straight days. Every night we had dinner.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could have afforded it, but it was more about time. It was more about, the going to the grocery store and needing the attention to be there and not having time to deviate. So that's all great. So everything's good now with your son. This is in like COVID
yeah,
2019.
yeah.
You guys are getting out of debt. How the heck do you go from Dave Ramsey, which I would say is like elementary school for personal finance? I'm the same way. My wife and I started with, and I'm not here to throw shade at Dave Ramsey. I think he does a great job getting people out of debt. But I felt like once I got out of debt, I needed something a little bit more. And I
Yeah.
felt like I kind of graduated. How do you go from scratching the surface to now you're a net worth millionaire in under a decade? What are some of the next steps you guys take?
Yeah, you're speaking to the choir again. Before we started this conversation, I had this conversation with my wife, and she was like, "Well, we don't really align ourselves a whole bunch with Dave Ramsey, but his curriculum, his ideas, his help. It was phenomenal. And I would tell people that 1,000 times over. If you need a starting spot, this will work. If you do it, it will work. And he's right. He calls it, Dave is you got to dive in. You can't dip your toes in this stuff, right? I had made a
Gazelle
mess.
intense.
Yeah, I had made a mess, right? And I knew I'd made a mess. And I don't know if my wife would say she had made a mess too, but a lot of our debt was student loans and car loans. And man, do I hate car loans these days. But that's a whole nother story. They just trap you. And so when we got to square one, we'll call it no debt owed to anybody. In fact, we even had a moment where we were renting, so we didn't even have a mortgage. We owed nobody a dime. And man, what an absolutely empowering feeling. And so the next steps were to take your income and use it and channel it the right way. Um, as we mentioned, the steps across the education, I was starting to make more money. In addition to that, my wife had moved up to Ohio, um, in 2017, and her job was also doing the same thing, and she was seeing promotions and opportunities. And so it wasn't like we were still sitting at the same salary where we were when we started. So you always have that hope. And I think that's important to let people know that while you're doing these steps or these small battles or small wins, there are other things out in the distance, maybe in your peripheral vision that you don't see that are starting to change. Right. And so um, we started sitting down and attacking different items, putting more money into her 401k, putting more money into my 403b, and then actually getting to a point where our accountant was like, you all should probably sit down with a financial advisor and start channeling some of we were kind of doing it. I think it's so important to educate yourself, right? But we weren't. It's not my profession. I'm not a financial advisor, and I think it's important to tell our kids that too. I'm not your financial
Right.
advisor. I am your teacher, and so we sat down with a group of financial advisors, and they started to instruct us on some different things that we can do, and we asked the hard questions too to them. Why? And before I say yes and I sign my name, let me go research this and see why this is good for me, and are there other options? And so really, it just started like that. And when you don't owe a car payment of $700 a month, and you're not paying off a credit card bill of $750 a month, and you're not paying medical debt anymore, right? All this money's coming in that you get to send where you want. And so that was really how we were able to start clearing some pretty big time hurdles.
So are you guys also, I know you mentioned your wife's in corporate America. She's got, a 401k match, I'm assuming,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got the 403b. You're going to have
Yep,
a
yep,
pension.
yep,
She'll have Social Security.
yep.
Are you guys also filling up those Roth IRA buckets? Is that something that you guys
Yep,
like to
yep,
fill up?
we're doing that as well. We're working on our son's 503b, and I hope that if
529?
or sorry, 529, yeah, or 529. And I think this is, it's funny. I just, a little slip of the tongue. There's a lot of language in limbo here, and as people are
Yeah.
listening to your podcast, I think it's important to stop, hit pause, and go look up what we're talking about. If you don't know what a 529 plan is, and you have a child who's of any age, and you want to have a vision for them to attend a school or a trade school, and now even if they don't go to school, there's some opportunities to roll those
Yeah.
over, right? Like,
Yep.
go do your research and go find out why this is advantageous. It doesn't take a ton of money to get started. And then I think that happened for us too, as we started to see these things happening, and all of a sudden you get excited and you're like, oh my gosh, look at where his account is now. Hey, let's put more money there. And we do, we play silly games with ourselves. I call them silly. I don't know if they're necessarily silly. If we use the sitter for max during a couple of days during the week, and then we don't use 3 days, we'll take that money that we would have normally given to the sitter and we put it into his 529 plan. We're paying extra on our mortgage every single month. That's a big goal of ours, is to pay that debt down ASAP. Um, my wife found a little thing on TikTok years ago about some lady that everything she sells on Facebook Marketplace, we all have it in our house. We all have the stuff,
Yeah.
right? And right
Yeah.
now, I'm phasing out some of the baby stuff and putting it on Facebook Marketplace. Every single penny of that stuff goes right back into the mortgage. Instead of going out to eat, instead of using it for more stuff, the sooner you pay off your house, boy, another debt gone. You can start doing some really cool things, and then you can really start talking about what retirement looks like when you don't have those kind of payments.
So looking back one more time, and then we won't bring up the
Yeah.
ex-wife.
No.
Um, do you think that, for people out there that, they might be like, okay, well, this is great, amazing story. Eric's making, good money as a teacher there in Ohio. Wife is in corporate America. She's in HR. This probably couldn't be done on two teacher salaries. You've lived in a two teacher salary household. Is this possible for somebody who's even on two teacher salaries?
100%. Yeah. And I would have, you know what I would have said? 15 years ago, I would have said, no way. I wouldn't have believed it. But I'm living proof of it. Absolutely. It's just dedication. It's channeling your money where it belongs. And I hate to pick because I don't know everybody's story, and I always make sure that my students know that when they come into my classroom. There are students that come into my classroom that they're scrapping to find the next meal, right? And
Yeah.
sitting across the table is some kid who's you know driving a BMW to school who doesn't know what it looks like. And I make it so important that they both understand each other. And so
Mhm.
we don't know everybody's stories, but I do see like what I would say. I just kind of, with my eyes wide open, the dining out right now in America. Holy cow! Restaurants are packed. People are lined up out the doors, and I'm like, we all know how expensive it is to go out to eat, right? That was something that changed in our home during COVID. Everybody's kind of locked down. I got a passion for cooking, and maybe my kids and my wife were fueling my fire and going, "Dad, you're so good," and tell me all those nice, kind things, and it became something I get super excited about, and I love to prepare a fine meal on a Tuesday night and set it down at the table, and everybody's sitting around laughing and telling stories, and we're all eating this food that is a fraction of the cost of what it would look like to go
Oh
to
man,
Texas
I don't have what
Roadhouse
you
or
have. I've got two kids. I don't have, I know some of your kids are now, adults. You've got a daughter getting married. Congratulations on that
thank you.
this December. But we've got a 13-year-old and 11-year-old. And if we were just to go to Chick-fil-A, family of four with taxes and everything, that's
I was gonna
$50
say it's
right
50
there.
bucks.
And, son's got baseball, daughter's got volleyball, son's got basketball, AAU basketball, travel volleyball.
Filling
If
up
you
those
don't
gas tanks.
plan and if you're not intentional, all of a sudden you're eating out 3 to 5 nights a week. And you're also saying I can't afford this and I can't afford to invest. But I would be willing to bet that for a lot of people, because I see the same thing you do. I drive down Western Boulevard in Jacksonville, North Carolina on a Friday night, and there are lines wrapped around Olive Garden and Longhorn and Texas Roadhouse. I'd be willing to venture that a lot of families are spending 400 to maybe $1,000 a month on eating out
I wouldn't
on
even
top
know. I
of their
wouldn't.
groceries.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know I wouldn't even be able to approximate those numbers that you're talking about. Like, I just see it, and I just know,
Yeah.
like you said, from my own. You go to Chick-fil-A and you're dropping 50 bucks, and you know what has shifted is my thought, and I go, man, 50 bucks into his into his 529 plan, or $50 into my mortgage actually reduces it by $150 when it's all said and done because we're chewing off that interest, right?
Yeah.
And I just start think I've just have shifted my thought process of what money is. I hope not to a detriment because there's a fine balance as well,
Yeah.
right? But I think what you said too is it's all about planning. The planning isn't just money. I sit down with a calendar, and my wife and I sit down and we go, okay, here's what Monday looks like. We're all home, but we're running around. Let's just do a crock pot meal that's ready for us when we get home instead of we'll just pass through Arby's and grab some dinner for everybody, or Subway, or hey, Tuesday we've got this award ceremony we've got to go to. Why don't we make a casserole that's just ready to go? And so Monday night I make the casserole and I put it in the fridge, and then we put it in the oven before we go. Like, it is intentional planning, and it's not just about money. It's about life coming at you and getting ahead of it just a little bit at a time.
It sounds like for spouses, the key word, one of the key themes of this episode as we get ready to wrap up here is communication. You're communicating about what the plan is this week. We've got 3 events that are around dinner time. If we throw something on the crock pot, we can do that. It's talking about the weekly budgeting meetings. Hey, let's look at the calendar. This is when we're going to be off. This is when I can take time off. We're going to go to Myrtle Beach for 5 days in July or whatever, and we're going to start saving up, 6 months ahead of time so we can pay cash for a vacation
Yes, I don't want to
versus
come home
like
with that bill.
running on the credit card. Then you go to the mailbox and then you see how much fun you had at Myrtle Beach, and then you've got 25% interest. Any other tips and tricks as we've got like a minute or two left? You've talked about you hate car payments. You love cooking now. You learned to cook during COVID. Your family loves it. That saves money. You're taking extra money, paying off the house. You want to be completely debt free. Are there any other tips and tricks out there for the teachers, maybe that you guys do that you think could offer a different way of doing things for the folks listening?
I think there's always just those opportunities too to pick up different odds and ends jobs. The best way to grow your money is to make more money, right? And as a teacher, when you have some summer opportunities, I like to give golf instruction, and I can make a little bit extra money if I want to do that.
I'll pay you to
I,
come
I
teach me to golf. I'm terrible.
Let's go. You live in North Carolina. They got some good golf. We can go have
Come
some
on.
fun. All right. Yeah, I used to work construction a little bit on the side. My brothers own a construction company, and I would go work with them every once in a while, or my father. There's always opportunities. There's even great opportunities out there right now, like Upworks, right? If you have a skill set, or teachers pay teachers, like there's always ways to go make a little extra money. And when you do that and you direct that money not into like eating out or vacations, and you direct it to things that are important, you will find a little more wiggle room in your ability to set up your future. So for teachers in general, and I love your podcast idea, like holy cow, I'm sure you're watching someone like Cole Hammer out there too, right?
Yeah.
And you can't quite show him on. I would love
A
to
little
have a
too much
conversation.
cussing.
I'd love to talk to him someday. Be like, dude, you got a good thing going. Can we do like one clean one every once in a while so we can show kids? Like, because he just shoots it straight, right? And I think
Yeah.
that is important too. You just got to be direct. As Courtney and I, we're raising 3 children, and now, Max 2. He's going to start to hear these conversations. We made that a priority to the children. No college debt. And that is a hard one to swallow for kids. And we said, if you don't take on college debt, we will write you a check on your graduation day for $5,000. We will give you a heads up. And I'll tell you what, we're 3 for 3. My daughter graduated from Bowling Green State University, debt free. She gets to get married. She's going to have this beautiful wedding, and she's not straddled with any debt. My son is currently building a golf course out in Washington State. He's 3 years through school. They're paying him very handsomely. He's covering all of his bills. He will leave school debt free. And my son, who just graduated back here in May, is off to school to be a nurse, and he has a full ride. Not being straddled with that debt is huge. And I know that, a lot of teachers are listening to this now and they're like, well, a little too late. I got a teaching degree from a private university where I probably paid $25,000 to $30,000 a year 30 years ago. I could have got it up the road at a fraction of the cost. And you just got to start looking at those kind of things. So I think if there was that one little last piece out there, it would be, help your children understand what's out there. It's not a flex. It's not a showcase of look at my kid going to, wherever it might be. I don't want to sit there and pinpoint schools and hammer them, but there are a lot of great opportunities, community college to get started, public and state universities to go at a much cheaper rate where they offer the same, and it's nice to have a wife who's in HR who says, yeah, it doesn't really matter a whole bunch. We want to know what you're like as a person, and that's your hireable asset. So,
Yeah. I'm convinced that a lot of the decisions that teachers unfortunately get stuck with, it's that college decision that we can't go back and change because nobody told us the difference between public and private. And,
uh,
like you said, you don't need to go to a college that costs $90,000 a year to be a public school teacher. It's all about your personality. It's all about, being there on time and knowing somebody.
yep,
You
connections.
connections. You don't have to go to the fancy university to do that. So I love that message. And heck, we're teachers. We love helping other people. Maybe it's, you can't, clean up the spilled milk on that one right now, but you can help somebody else not be in that position. So Eric, this was a lot of fun. We definitely need to get you back on the podcast next season because you have a wealth of information. We could keep going and going, but unfortunately, normally I like to keep it around an hour or so.
I
But
do
I
get a
really
little
appreciate you
long-winded.
taking the time to do it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And again, if you want to do it again, there's more to talk about. Like I said, I get a little long winded, and I'm just super passionate about this. And it's been it's changed the direction of my life. Not only being able to teach it, but being able to live it too. So thanks for having me, Dave.
Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you to all the fit listeners for joining us on this week's version of the Financially Independent Teachers Podcast. We hope you join us for next week. And as always, be frugal, be fearless, and be a lifelong learner. Take care, everybody.